Welcome, I'm Martina, your trusty guide through the pages of Camp Half-Blood and beyond. Grab your camp shirts, ready your weapons, and let's embark on this epic adventure together. This is Delphi Dispatches. First off, I want to wish you all a happy new year, and what better way to start into 2024 than talk about Percy Jackson. If 2023 was the year of Percy Jackson anticipation, 2024 will be the year of Percy Jackson celebration. Since it's the 1st of January, let's make some New Year's resolutions and some predictions. For predictions, I have the following. We will get the green light for at least season 2, if not more. The third new Percy Jackson book will be announced, so we have The Chalice of the Gods, Wrath of the Triple Goddess, which comes out later this year, and my theory is that at the latest on the book tour of that book, we will get the announcement for the third book, or at least the name for the third book. And my theory is that in this book, Percy has to get a college application letter from Athena. Yes! My prediction is also that the Kane Chronicles movie will get, also greenlit. I think it's not greenlit yet, they're just working on the script. And the Percy Jackson show itself will be nominated and win a lot of awards. And my resolutions for the podcast are I will get at least one guest on this podcast as soon as I figure out how to do that. We will finish the show and then continue with the books. I would also like to do a direct comparison between the series and the first Peter Johnson movie. And if there's a production of the Lightning Thief musical somewhere near where I live, I want to go there and make an episode about the musical as well. But that's enough of housekeeping for now. Let's dive right into the Delphi Dispatches news part. There's been a lot happening, and since I'm recording this on the 27th of December, the episode 3 just came out. So there's not a lot of news about this episode in particular, but we will include news about this episode then next week. But we have a lot of news and content surrounding the first 2 episodes. On the 20th of December, we had a video by TV Insider where Rick reacted to the Capture the Flag scene and gave some commentary. He also talked about the gecko we see in the little Percy moments, the gecko he was petting, that they had a specific gecko wrangler. So we now know it's a gecko, not a salamander, as I said last week. And that since Walker had a lot of training already with fighting, he had to remember how to fight bad. Which, as a person who does not understand anything about how to fight, it looked good, so if this was bad, I'm so excited to see what's good fighting. And there was also this fall Walker took, and he had to do it about 20 times. If you know which fall it is, it's during the fight with the Ares kids when he gets pushed off by one of the Ares kids and falls off a hill down onto the beach. It looks painful, and imagine that doing that about 20 times. Rick also talked about how he really loved the electrical spear and how cold the water was. On YouTube we also got a video of the premiere where we saw them building all the scenes and the red, actually blue carpet, and how it all went down with pictures and interviews. It was just a bit more than a minute, so it wasn't really a lot of content in there. Another video that was released on the 22nd this time was by Entertainment Weekly, where the trio played Emoji Decoder, which is very funny. I loved how they did that. But that's not actually the most important thing that happened on the 22nd. The most important Percy Jackson related thing that happened on the 22nd of December is that the soundtrack was finally released on Spotify and etc. I'm telling you, I'm listening to this soundtrack on repeat the whole time. It's just so good. It's 16 songs, the whole album. If you listen to it, to all the songs back to back, it's about an hour and 3 minutes, I think. The names of the songs are very giving away which song takes place where. So it's not some random words. So I'm not gonna talk too much about the songs themselves since I don't want to spoil anything. But if you want to listen, I really highly recommend it. It's awesome. It's really good. So yesterday, which was the 26th of December, we got the news that the first episode of Percy Jackson amassed over 13.3 million views in the first 6 days of its release. This is on Disney Plus and Hulu combined. It's just the first episode, and this makes it one of the top 5 most watched series this year on Disney Plus and Hulu. And if you think about it, it's based on a middle grade book, so it's like for this audience. It's the target audience. Yes, there are a lot of older people like me who watch it, but if you compare it to other series that came out with Marvel and Star Wars, who are more geared towards adults. And also, speaking of Marvel and Star Wars, Percy Jackson has no prior world building. So alone for that fact, we need to take into account how amazing these numbers are for the first episode alone. And today, we also got this really interesting interview with Variety. They released the story of how the creative team updated the Medusa storyline for this series. And it's really worth a read. It's too much to summarize. For me, I just highly recommend you read it. Of course, after watching the 3rd episode, because there are spoilers in this interview. We also got a few general things. Most of them are posts on the Percy Jackson series Instagram and TikTok. I'm just gonna talk about a few highlights. One of the things that's probably gonna continue is the posters for each episode. They look like trading cards, so if they're ever gonna release a Myth or Magic game, they should make a special pack with the episode posters as special edition cards, I don't know. On the poster for the first episode, we see Percy in the center, and we see the statue of Perseus holding Medusa's head. Percy is holding his pen. We see the Minotaur. In the background, it's Manhattan, and there's also lightning throughout. On the poster for the second episode, we see our trio in armor, and there's forest in the background. We see a picture of camp. We see the bathroom, and we see, I think it's Poseidon's cabin. Then we also got this video. It's a Welcome to Camp Half-Blood video with this generated TikTok voice. If you know what I mean, you can think of it. And when I first saw it, I thought about, is this in the spirit of the orientation film Nico gets to see in book 3? It's not as detailed as I thought an orientation film would be, since it's just not even a minute long, but it's really cool since we see a lot of camp. We also got this little video of Walker reading the description of camp straight from the book, and a lot of people wrote in the comments on this post that they want the audiobook reread by the cast in general or Walker, which I think would be really cool, because I myself am an audiobook person because I need to be able to do something else while listening to a book. And I also read/listened to the Percy Jackson books the first time as an audiobook, not as a physical copy. And I'm not the biggest fan of the guy who reads them, so just saying. Another video we got is called Campfire Questions. It's who's most likely to whatever kind of style. And in the end, I don't remember the question, but the cool thing is they pointed all at each other, which looked like the Spider-Man meme. It's really funny. And the next thing I think we'll also get from each episode, it's a short behind the scenes video, and they call it Demigod Diaries. And if you know the books, you know there is a little side book called the Demigod Diaries with some short stories. I found this really cool. In the Demigod Diaries for episode 1, they showed how the mechanical bull looked, which they used for the Minotaur scenes. They showed how the car was used on the stage. And at the end, we see a man in a motion capture suit who is presumably standing in for the Minotaur, helping up Walker, and it's literally the last scene of this video, and it looks just really funny. For the Demigod Diaries video of episode 2, we got a lot of sword fighting training and how camp looked, and apparently they had to take a gondola to get to camp, so I really want to do some research on where they probably filmed it. We know it's somewhere near or in Vancouver, and I don't know how many gondolas there are in or near Vancouver. We also get to know that Walker's little brother was on set and had a cameo in episode 2 as one of the campers. And I also just discovered today that Walker's big sister also made a cameo as a half-blood. We get some videos of how they filmed Capture the Flag. There's also a sneak peek video of episode 3, and it's the same we saw at the same sneak peek we saw at the end of episode 2. We also got another introduction video to camp. It's not the same as the Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. I think it's the official art of the map, although it doesn't 100% correlate with how it looks in the series. And they show us all the things we got on screen. They show us the most important spots of the camp, like the canoe lake, the amphitheater, the strawberry fields, the mess hall, the forge, of course the big house, the northern woods, the creek, Thalia's pine tree, as well as the Pegasus stables. And the Pegasus stables we actually have not seen before. We saw them in episode 3. Well, it's not the stables exactly, it's just a field where there are a lot of Pegasi. And the last thing we see are the cabins. We also got some moments from sets, from behind the scenes of the Minotaur, to Minotaur being a blue mechanical bull. And also we see a picture of Orion's first day where him and Walker are just in a conversation. And Dior also posted a video on her Instagram. It's a behind the scenes of her fighting on the beach with the spear, which looks so cool. Each of the actors of the trio got an interview with Teen Vogue, and those were also really interesting to read. I'm just gonna tell you a bit about what they said in their respective interviews. And let's start with Grover/Orion. He talked about the audition process and that Rick apparently knew when he saw him that he was Grover. He also talked about how exactly he got the part. He talked about the racist backlash, seeing the Minotaur for the first time in motion capture, which was really weird. How he prepared for the role, how it took really long testing ears and horns that they look perfect, and that he spent 2 months learning on how to walk like a goat. He also said the connection between Grover and Annabeth is really important to him because he brought both Annabeth and Percy to camp, and now they're fighting over him, whose side are you on? We also get to know the thing, well, actually we know this thing already because we've heard it a lot of times and they keep reiterating it, so it must be true, that Walker, Orion, and Leah are Percy, Grover, and Annabeth in real life. He also said he really liked the Ares scene, and the last thing he mentioned is, no matter how different you are, there's always a place for everyone. Now for the interview with Leah, who plays Annabeth, she says she is Annabeth in real life, and although there was some racist backlash, she always reminds herself that Rick chose her for a reason, and he also said in a lot of interviews that she is Annabeth, so that's what it is, and we love her for who she is. I have a quote from her where she's saying, "People will try to break you down, but we were made strong." She was also talking about how the actress playing Annabeth in the movies, Alexandra Daddario, had a tweet in 2020 where she defended Leah. She also talked about the audition process and that Annabeth trains Percy in the mythological world, while Percy helps her reconnect with her humanity, since she's been at camp since she was 7. And she's most excited about the Waterland scene, and she's also the self-described mother of the group. Now we also have Percy/Walker. He talked about a lot of the props that he took from set, and that he also went to Hot Topic to get more Camp Half-Blood shirts, which I felt like, Walker, you are Percy Jackson. You should just call someone and say you need more Camp Half-Blood shirts and you should get them. You shouldn't have to go out to Hot Topic to find them. He also said that while filming, he got to get his junior diver's license, and that he grew up alongside Percy in the audition and filming process. Because now he's taller and he has a deeper voice than when they filmed. I mean, puberty hits. It's kind of unavoidable. And then he also talks about that he read the books more than 7 or more times already since he was in 3rd grade. And that Percy shows a lot of emotion while fighting, and that Percy and Walker have a similar sarcasm. And he also tells a little anecdote how they were playing ping pong with swords and have a lot of inside jokes around this thing they did. He also would like to meet the other people that played Percy before him, like Logan Lerman, and the one who played him in the musical. I forgot his name. I think his first name is Chris. Yeah, and he wants to recreate the Spider-Man meme with them. I love that Walker and I have a similar sense of humor. And he's also really excited to film for season 5, the River Styx portion, and for this season, the Ares fight. Now we have 2 more news things to talk about, one of them being that on the 31st of January 2024, so one day after the season concludes, there will be a making-of documentary called A Hero's Journey, the making of Percy Jackson and the Olympians on Disney+. So probably an extra episode of Delphi Dispatches dedicated to this documentary. I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, our obligatory end news segment, the Rotten Tomatoes score. As of the 27th of December at 5:41 p.m., Percy Jackson and the Olympians has a 96% average on the tomato meter and is certified fresh, with 51 fresh critic reviews and 2 rotten critic reviews. It has an average audience score of 87% with over 1,000 ratings and has 4.4 out of 5 stars. Okay, let's continue with Demigod Discussions about episode 3. Episode 3 is called We Visit the Garden Gnome Emporium and is 45 minutes long. I think it's like 1 minute longer than episode 2, so yay. I'm a sucker for long episodes, but I understand that they have to keep them somewhat short and make them also long because attention span of children is not that of me, although my attention span is also not that very long. Let's get into what happened in episode 3. We start off with Percy going to the attic. There we see like shots with a lot of stuff, things you would typically find in an attic. But also some like Greek vases and scrolls. And we also see the Minotaur horn from Percy's like defeat of the Minotaur. And I'm wondering, how did that get up there? I thought it was like one of Percy's prized possessions. Or is it another Minotaur horn? Did someone else rip off a Minotaur horn once and they stored it up there? But then we meet the Oracle. And Percy introduces himself to the Oracle and has this like adorable voice crack because he's kind of scared of it. The Oracle is like this mummified old lady, and Percy calls her a Halloween decoration and wants to leave, but then she moves. Oh no, she moves. From her mouth there is like this billow of green smoke, and up until this point I totally forgot what happens next. I was like, yeah, there's this green smoke and the mummy talks, but no, Gabe shows up. Well, it's not actually Gabe, but the mist takes the form of Gabe. In the books, it takes like the form of Gabe and his like poker buddies, not just Gabe alone. But here it's just Gabe because we have not met any of Gabe's poker buddies. And like with Gabe's New York accent, we get the prophecy, the first prophecy of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. We will hopefully get a lot more prophecies, although it's not that fun for our demigods. And the prophecy is as followed. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. And then we go to the mess hall. Yes, that's it with the prophecy for now. In the mess hall, all these tables are set aside and there are a lot of people like gathered around the hearth in a circle. Most of them are campers, but we also have Mr. D and Chiron and Percy like standing together. And they confirm that there is a quest, and the quest will lead to the underworld, which is under Los Angeles. And Percy must choose who goes with him, because a quest is always undertaken by 3 people. And Chiron tells him that he has gathered the most compelling candidates of camp, which means those are not just like the head counselors of each cabin. First of all, because Chiron said they were just compelling candidates, and second of all, we see that Luke and Chris Rodriguez are standing there, and we know that there can only be one head counselor, and they're both in the Hermes cabin. So Percy doesn't let Chiron finish his sentence when he says he's choosing Annabeth as his first quest buddy, and Chiron is kind of like, didn't you even want to hear the other people's names? And Percy justifies it with he knows she would push him down a flight of stairs if this would be necessary for the mission to succeed. And I was like, yeah, Clarice would probably do the same, but I'm happy you chose Annabeth because she's at least a little more nice to you than Clarice is. And for the second quest buddy, we cut to Grover, who is currently shoveling Pegasus poop. And he's also like talking to Pegasus because satyrs can talk to animals. This is where Percy joins him, and we find out that this was a punishment by Mr. D because Grover told Percy about his mom. Grover just wants to like make small talk and asks Percy who he chose for the quest, and Percy answers like, you. Grover thinks this is a joke until he realizes it's not, and that he would also come on this quest. Grover also asks Percy why him, and this is where we get like a little flashback to the Oracle, and we find out the prophecy isn't just 2 sentences, there's a little bit more, and the rest of the prophecy goes as follows. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you friend, and fail to save what matters most in the end. Which reminded me of the musical where they like scream out the in the end. I cannot sing, but anytime there's like a sentence that's the same as in the musical, I instantly think about the song. I really need to do an episode on the musical. Let's do that next year. Well, not next year, this year, because it's 2024 when you're hearing this. Time is complicated. Well, anyway, let's get back to Percy and Grover. And Percy says that he trusts Grover, and there's nothing more important than trust. And this is when Grover says, I will pack the best snacks, and this is my man. This is my G-man, because if you need to bring something on a road trip, it's good snacks and good music, but since they're like not traveling by car, music is an issue. But we'll talk about music a little bit later in this episode. Then we're back in the Poseidon cabin, and Percy is packing his stuff when Luke comes and joins him. He asks Percy how much money they got, and we find out they got $200 in cash and some golden coins, which Percy is like, I think they're Canadian or from Chuck E. Cheese, which I know that a lot of people make fun of Canadian money because it's like see-through. I think the bills have like some see-through parts, but I've never heard anyone make fun of the coins, so I don't know. And the Chuck E. Cheese reference is fun, even though there's no Chuck E. Cheese in Europe. At least I've never seen one. But Luke explains that those little gold coins are called drachmas. And we also see there is like an octopus on a drachma. I think in the book it was a owl. Maybe there are different ones, but the ones you can like see good, there are octopi? I think it's octopi on them. And yeah, so dollars for the human world, drachmas for the mythic world. Don't mix them up. But Luke didn't just come here to say goodbye to Percy. He brought a gift, and it's a box with shoes. The box and the shoes both have the Hermes symbol we also saw in front of the cabin on them, and the shoes themselves are like red with white laces. And if you say Maya, the laces turn into wings. So they're flying shoes. Fitting, since we know Hermes is often depicted with his flying shoes, flying sandals, or wings like stuck to his feet. And we also learned that this was a gift from Luke's dad. So a gift from Hermes. A gift from the gods. Or from a god. And Percy tells Luke that he was thinking about choosing him, but if he got the chance to save Sally, nothing could stop him. And if it gets in the way of the quest, Annabeth would try to stop Percy, and Luke would be on her side. But Luke assures him that it's okay and that he should take care of her. Now it's time to leave. We see our trio at Talia's tree. Annabeth is like quite sentimental leaving it, and Percy says to Grover she's really gonna miss that tree. And this is where Grover tells Percy how Annabeth and Luke got to camp. It was by Talia staying behind to fight the monsters following them, which were the Furies. Even though their satyr protector tried to stop her, Talia lost, and in the last moment Zeus turned her into a tree to save her life. And Percy and I think the same thing. The best that this all-powerful being could do is turn her into a tree? And Annabeth says she was the bravest demigod ever, and she fought valiantly and met a hero's fate. Where Percy says she met a pinecone's fate. And Annabeth just snaps back at him that forbidden children are always in danger. Here's a quote from her. Do exactly as I say, and maybe you'll survive this. Which is like, yes, ma'am, I will follow your every word. But not Percy. Percy is like, does she think she's in charge? And Grover replies, who do you think would be in charge? And Percy likes democracy apparently, because he wants to do a show of hands. But we're already leaving, so no democracy for now. We see them in a cab getting back to New York. Starting on their trip, we find out that heroes' quests are world-defining events. They made and broke empires and altered the course of civilization. They changed the balance of power on Mount Olympus. Quests are sacred. When they get out of the cab, we see Annabeth like seeing the outside world, and especially New York for the first time since she came to camp, and she has like wonder in her eyes. And they enter the bus terminal. In the next scene, we're on the bus and Percy's like sitting next to the toilets, and we find out why they couldn't just fly to LA, which would be really fast. And since Percy is a child of Poseidon that shouldn't exist, Zeus would just strike them right out of the air, because that is Zeus's domain, and if you try to fly, he will take it personal and kill you. Then we're at a gas station stop and Annabeth gets up to get snacks. But Percy also wants to go and wants to vote on who gets to leave. And Annabeth is like, this is no democracy. They start arguing and Grover starts singing a song. I told you we're gonna talk about music. It's called a consensus song and I have like the words written out. I'm going to read them because first of all, I cannot sing like I said, and second of all, I don't know if it would be copyright if I sang it. So the text is as follows. Oh golly, the road is getting bumpy, 'cause I got me some friends who just can't get along. Oh dear, when the team's getting grumpy, the trick to getting through this is singing this song. And the others are really confused. Percy's asking, what are you doing? And Grover explains in verse 2, we say nice things about each other, and no one is impressed and Annabeth just leaves. In the gas station, Annabeth picks up candy, and the candy is called Big Oof, and I don't think that's a real thing, but I love that it's called Big Oof, which was basically what we called the movies, a Big Oof. And she can't decide which one and takes like a lot of every single flavor. And as she's paying, she notices some woman who walked behind her. We also get this like conversation from Percy and Grover late over the end of this scene, where Grover explains to Percy that a child of the big three gods is more likely to be spotted by a monster, that they're not just attracted by power. And Percy just pipes in like, are they attracted by fear? And Grover just clears it up. No, that's bees, which I can confirm. Bees smell fear. It actually depends on the monster how they sense you. They sense your shame, your need of glory, etc. When Annabeth enters the bus, she notices someone else. She puts her invisibility cap on and surprise, surprise, it's Mrs. Dodds. She's back. She didn't stay blipped for long. Annabeth sits either next to her or behind her. I can't really see because she's invisible, and starts talking to her. Why they came, like why they're here, and it would be better for them if they just left, hinting at that the other person Annabeth noticed earlier was one of Mrs. Dodds' sisters, because we know there are 3 of them. They kind of get on like roasting each other. She also calls Annabeth the pride of Athena's offspring, which in theory would be a nice compliment, but saying it from her and like she said it, it doesn't sound that good. Dodds makes Annabeth an offer. She also calls her one of the most formidable demigod children alive, and that they're here to collect her friend. Dodds wants Annabeth to lure Percy off the bus to make it quick and quiet without a lot of people watching, and that her quest would continue quiet without any hindrance from Percy. But here we notice that Annabeth left and is warning the boys to open the back window now. Like right now. They have to break the back window because it doesn't open, and Mrs. Dodds in full fury mode is coming towards them in the back. The driver noticed that someone broke the window and just through the speaker tells everyone to get off the bus. And since there's only like one corridor in the bus, everyone leaving is like making it harder for Dodds to get to the back. We also see a quick glimpse of how people see her when she is in fury form, so they just see normal human Dodds. And through the open window, another Fury flies in, so we have 2 Furies. And from what we know from the credits, it's Tisiphone, and she's probably also the person Annabeth noticed in the shop. Annabeth just chucks her dagger at the other Fury and like hits her immediately, and she disintegrates. They jump out of the window and run away, but before they leave, Percy grabs the box with the shoes, I'm like, why couldn't it be in a bag? Why does he have to lug a box across America? Now they're just running through the woods, and Grover says that there's a satyr path and that they need to follow it, and it's a path the satyr explorers make that makes them harder to track. And Percy just wants a phone to call camp, and Annabeth is like, no, we don't need help. Whereas Percy says we're not even in Trenton, which I had to look up because I don't know where Trenton is, and it's like not that far from New York. And then Percy says, I didn't even know they had forests in New Jersey, which reminded me of another song from the musical with the line, we're lost in the woods somewhere in New Jersey and we're never gonna make it to LA. So yeah, that's the feeling we get right now. And Percy thinks if they can call camp and tell them that they think everything was a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has those days. Nobody's perfect. And Annabeth just replies with, why are you so afraid of who you are? And Percy and Annabeth start arguing, and Grover wants to just appease them both and starts talking about his uncle Ferdinand, who apparently is the satyr who made this satyr path. And during this argument, Annabeth is trying to keep pulling Grover into this, and Percy's like, why are you pulling Grover into this? He is my protector. But we find out he was Annabeth's protector first. And before they can get into that, Grover just says, do you guys smell that? Which is a perfect distraction from anything, because food. And then he says something in the likes of, quiet, I can't smell anything. Perfect, it's very relatable. He smells hamburgers. So Grover just charges on, and the others follow him, and Grover says someone cooking in the middle of nowhere on a satyr path has to be from their world. This is when we reach Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium. We're not gonna mess around. They know what's up immediately. There are petrified stone folk everywhere, as Annabeth points out. And she says it's clearly someone from our world. And Annabeth basically already knows who it is, even though she doesn't say it. And then Alecto shows up. So the Fury that got away came back. And she says to Annabeth that she should have accepted her offer, which confuses Percy, but he clicks Annabeth's reaction. And then we hear a voice saying, not today, friends, not on my doorstep. Which at first you're like, oh my god, someone here help us. And then comes Medusa. Everyone looks away, like starting with Mrs. Dodds, then Annabeth and Grover. Percy's the last one to look away because he sees everyone else looking away. And I'm telling you, Medusa looks so good. She has like this beige, a bit of like a hint of pinkish dress, which gives like 20s, 30s, with this gorgeous hat and veil in front of her eyes, because of course you can't look her in the eyes or you'll be stoned, but more on that later. And she invites them inside and seems very nice and tells our trio that Alecto will not bother them as long as they're with her, but she won't leave either. And Medusa knows who Percy is and like introduces herself. And Annabeth just calls her a monster. There are a lot of good quotes from Medusa. I will just keep using them throughout. Here she says, we all choose who we make our monsters. And then Medusa just walks inside. And Percy just thinks like, yeah, we can trust her. And the others are like, what? And I'm like, what? And Percy justifies it with Sally used to tell him stories about her and she isn't what people think, and follows her inside. And here I came to think, Percy, I mean, yeah, your mom might know a little bit more about Greek mythology than the average person. But how do you know that what your mom thinks Medusa is like is actually what she's like? She could be worse, she could be better. Who knows? We'll find out soon. Inside it's really nice. There are like set tables, there's a lot of food and drinks, and then there are candles lit. And I'm thinking, how fast did she prepare all this? Did she know they were coming? Or does she just have it laying around all the time? It didn't seem like it was dusty or anything. And we also know that we see that there are multiple tables. There's like a big one in the middle, and surrounding are like little small ones, but they're all set. And on the big one, there are like 3 sets of plates and everything, so for our trio, and not Medusa, so what does that mean? and Percy and Grover wonder if the food is safe to eat, but Grover is ready to take that chance because he's so hungry. After they talk a bit, Medusa says that we are not our parents. This was like geared towards Annabeth, I think, the most, because Annabeth was thinking that Medusa would probably hold a grudge against her since she's the daughter of Athena, and she thinks that they have more in common than you think. And then they ask her what she is if she's not a monster, and she calls herself a survivor. They wonder why a Fury is terrified of just a survivor, and Medusa says she doesn't like bullies, and that the gift the gods gave her makes it so that she can't be bullied anymore. And Annabeth just says, no, that wasn't a gift, that was a curse. And this is where we start to get a little backstory on Medusa. She tells us that she loved Athena. With the love part, I'm like, this could go in multiple ways. It could be like romantic love, but also worship kind of love, like people who are religious, how they love their god. This conversation doesn't make it clear, and I don't think it has to. She was devoted to Athena. She said, Athena was everything to me. I worshipped her, I prayed to her, I made offerings for her, but she never answered. The next part gave me goosebumps. She said to Annabeth, I wasn't like you, sweetheart. I was you. This is where we see that she yearned for the approval of Athena as much as Annabeth does now. And she says she would have continued her devotion forever in silence, but then another god came along. This was Poseidon. And he broke that silence. She says that Poseidon told her she loved her. She felt seen, but apparently she was an embarrassment to Athena, who punished her, not Poseidon. That she was never to be seen again. And Annabeth doesn't believe this, and justifies it with Athena is always just. But here we get like this retaliation from Medusa, that this is what the gods want you to think. They want us to blame ourselves for their own shortcomings. And Annabeth just straight up calls Medusa a liar. I think there's like inside Medusa something snaps. Instead of confronting them head on, she says like, something's burning. Would you give me a hand? Asking Percy this. She thinks lunch is ready. Which could be also like interpreted like, I'm gonna eat you, although Medusa doesn't like eat people. Medusa leaves and Percy follows her. And Annabeth just tells Grover to get ready to run. So Annabeth knows there's something coming. In the kitchen, there is so much food, where I have the same question as before. When did she make it? How did she make a lot of it? All the logistics behind it. And Percy apologizes for Annabeth, and Medusa just says that she will betray him, which we got the vibes of this throughout this whole episode. But Percy doesn't believe her, and Medusa calls him an easy mark. That she sympathizes with Sally, and she calls her a sister in a way, that they were targeted by the same monster, and that she feels protective over Percy. But in Percy's recollection, Sally never talked about Poseidon in that way. But Medusa asks Percy if his mother is safe now, and she wants to unsettle Percy with this and make her think that she can trust his friends to save Sally if the occasion arises. And she offers to remove the other two from the equation. And when she turns around, Percy is gone, which is also where Medusa takes her head off, and the snakes that make up her hair, that sound of them gets louder and they start moving more, and her hair gets wilder. Before, her hair was quite uniform and we saw the snakes moving a bit, but they were like still holding together hairstyle. Now they're just like more or less squirming about. Now our trio is gone, but Alecto is still out there, which means that they're still somewhere in Medusa's house. This is where we also get a clear view of Medusa's eyes, which are like white, and makes her this unnatural being even more than she is. We find out that our trio went down to the basement, which is never a smart idea if you've seen any horror movie. Medusa follows them, and when she steps like on the stairs, there's a fire starting. Not like a wild burn everything fire, but there are like 2 rows of a little fire going down the steps and illuminating the whole basement, which is huge. It's like this huge cavern with dozens of statues of petrified people. There are probably some cameos under all these statues which I didn't catch. But thing is, we saw also a lot of statues outside. But all these statues outside were monsters. The real people she kept hidden from the first people coming this way. And our trio hides between the crates and statues. A few of the statues we see a bit more are like tourists, hikers, also a policeman who's pulled out, I think, a stun gun. And they try to make a plan. Grover says he will use the shoes to distract her and accidentally activates the shoes and flies away, which is where Percy and Annabeth have to make up a new plan. Then Medusa says another quite relatable thing, which is, we are not our parents until we choose to be. And she keeps talking, and Percy is getting riptide, but Riptide gives off this glow, which gives his location away to Medusa, and she says to him that he should stand up and meet her face to face. He does stand up, but he closes his eyes. Smart Percy. And suddenly Grover crashes from somewhere up above and distracts Medusa, and this is the chance Annabeth uses to put her invisibility cap on top of Medusa's head to make Medusa invisible, and Percy swings his sword and decapitates Medusa. And I think the use of the invisibility cap here is really genius, since if you can't see her, you can't be petrified, because you only get petrified if you look into her eyes, not if she looks at you. Percy grabs the invisible hat and goes outside and uses it to turn Alacto into stone. And because he did so while she was flying, she falls down and breaks to a lot of pieces, which means bye-bye Mrs. Dodds forever? I don't know, let's see in the future. But then we go back down to the basement and find Grover staring at a satyr statue. And this statue is none other than Uncle Ferdinand. And Grover is really sad about this because this is as far as Uncle Ferdinand got on his quest. But unlike all the other people, he doesn't look afraid. Next, they discuss what they're gonna do with the head, because they can't just leave it. Maybe someone will accidentally find it and turn themselves into stone. Percy's first idea is to keep the head on it and bury it in the basement. But Annabeth wants to talk about something different, because she just found out that Sally Jackson is still alive and wants to know what Percy's actual motive is for going to the underworld. Percy's also pissed at Annabeth because he found out that Mrs. Dodds made her an offer. And before they really get going with fighting, Grover steps in and basically kicks their butt a bit. He explains to Percy that the hat is a gift from Athena and the only connection Annabeth has to her. And he explains to Annabeth that Percy has the chance to save the only person who ever cared for him. And Grover tells them that he tried the whole day to keep the quest on track without upsetting anyone. And this is really a nice quote. Maybe things need to get a little upsetting before they move forward. And they ask Percy what he's afraid of and why he's been fighting with both of them the whole day. And this is where Percy tells them the rest of the prophecy, that one of them would betray him. About Annabeth, he says, "I chose her because I couldn't imagine we'd ever be friends." And this comment really seems to hurt Annabeth. And to Grover he says if he could count on anyone, it would be Grover. But now he's feeling alone. He doesn't know what to think or who to trust, but he apologizes to Annabeth and says he didn't mean it that way when he said he didn't think they'd ever be friends. And Annabeth tells them about the offer Alecto gave her, and Percy tells them the offer Medusa made him. And we get this little friendship moment and bonding. And Grover gave a little speech, if you can call it a speech. You didn't choose to be demigods. We didn't choose this quest. But we can decide that as long as the three of us are together, none of us are gonna be alone. And this gave me the vibes of something Luke, Talia, and Annabeth would have said to each other when the three of them were on the road. And this is when Percy has an idea of what to do with Medusa's head. He goes through one of Medusa's address books since she ships a lot of her statues all over the world and even to Mount Olympus. And with the Hermes Express, he wants to ship her head to Olympus. And Annabeth and Grover are not fully on board. And Percy compares Medusa's head to batteries, saying, "You just send them back where they came from." And then we get one of the lines from the book I really love, where Annabeth says, "The gods will think we're impertinent." And then Percy replies with, "I am impertinent." and he justifies it as a tribute to the gods, especially Athena. And this is also a way that Annabeth can keep her head. And Grover slightly panics, but Percy makes everything good. We're starting to sing the consensus song we heard earlier from Grover. And the last scene we get in this episode is a delivery person having Percy's package under his arm and entering the Empire State Building. We also see he gets into an elevator and uses a key where a button appears out of nowhere saying 600 for the 600th floor. And we also see the label of the box, of the shipping box, where it says the gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York, New York. From Percy Jackson, which I love. It's like exactly the same as they described it in the book. And this person is going up the elevator. There's like easy listening music in the back, and we pan up to see the face of this delivery guy, and it is none other than Lin-Manuel Miranda, aka Hermes himself. The elevator music keeps playing. It's Arthur's theme by Christopher Cross, and the first words we hear from Hermes is him singing like a few bits of this song. And it made me really happy because I'm a big fan of Lynn. And then the elevator bell dings and the automatic voice says, Mount Olympus Causeway. Hermes smiles and the door opens and he goes out and we hear him say, you guys are not gonna believe this. Which is like, yes, like the god of thieves and trickery. It's perfect. This is like perfect. And then we get our credits, and the song we heard in the elevator continues throughout the credits, and we get a sneak peek until next episode, and let's look at those bits. We have Percy sitting in a fountain and Grover and Annabeth splashing him with water. This confused me a bit, so my theory, I think it's the part where he can't get wet, or he needs to heal. Then on a train, we see like a dog in a bag, and then we see Echidna, mother of all monsters, Suzanne Cryer, and she says, you should run now. Which is like, oh my god. And we get the St. Louis Arch, Percy shoving Grover and Annabeth into a flight of stairs and closing the door between them, the Chimera, and Percy, like this little dialogue from him that Percy does not expect help from Poseidon. And that's everything that happened in this episode. Now, let's look at the predictions from the old ones. So my theory about that we will get Athena in the season has not come true yet, but like I said, in this season somewhere. Then for predictions, specifically for this episode, we had the Oracle, we had the quest, we had them leave camp, we had the return of Mrs. Dodds, the bus scene, and Medusa. The one thing of my predictions we did not have is we meet the Fates. So, coming to the future predictions, I'm still sticking with we meet Athena this season. But I also added that we will meet the Fates this season, but I think we will meet them, if we're not going to meet them next episode, we will probably meet them towards the end of the series. So maybe in one of the last 2 episodes. Then the predictions and theories specifically for next episode, which is called I Plunge to My Death. Based on what we saw in the sneak peek, my theories are that we're gonna go on a train to St. Louis. We're gonna go on the Arch, and we're gonna fight Echidna twice. Once on the train, and once on the Arch. In the train, Annabeth and Grover will help fight her with Percy, but on the Arch, Percy will have to fight alone. He will also fall or jump out of the arch into the river. I'm really interested into how they're going to do that. There he will meet the Nereid, who tells him about the gifts, and Santa Monica. Those are like my predictions for next week. Now I have just a few Easter eggs I picked out this episode. In the attic, we have a helmet and like a claw thing in a jar. I couldn't find my copy of The Lightning Thief today, but I think at least one of those things was actually mentioned in the description of the attic in the book as well. And the next Easter egg I actually know because the staff writer of this episode, Daphne Olive, I think that's how you say her name, tweeted about it yesterday, I think, that when the trio gets out of the cab in New York, there is like this art in the background. I think it's for some art gallery or something. She said this was a drawing of her daughter, which is really cute. And the other thing, I don't really know if I can categorize this as Easter eggs, but I'm pretty sure that there would be some cameo in the statues. So some of these statues might be people we know, either we really know as like some famous people, or people like family from cast, crew or something. Now for my general thoughts and feelings about this episode, it's somewhat chronological. The Oracle and the basement were like exactly how I imagined them. They looked really cool and I love them. I took a really close look at like the necklaces the Oracle is wearing. I couldn't see that because we didn't get really a close-up of the Oracle itself. And on one side, she had like her hair somewhat over her neck a bit, but I didn't see a specific necklace we should see, if you know what I mean. Another thing, I noticed this, I don't remember if I said anything about it last episode, but I noticed this in episode 2 as well. Why are most of the campers, if not even all of the campers that are already in camp, why do they have the same amount of beads? There should be people with 5, so I think 5 is the most, because Annabeth has 5 and she's one of the people that's been there the longest. There should be like people with 5 beads, people with 4 beads, people with 1 bead, all of them. Actually, also people with no beads, because I'm pretty sure Percy is not the only new demigod that got there this summer. Now, here I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about Medusa. I loved her outfit, especially the hat and the veil. I love the portrayal, I love the actress. I already gushed about her in the last few episodes, but Jessica Parker Kennedy is just great. And when Medusa says she feels protective over Percy, I got this feeling it's because she could not be there for her own children. Because in the myth, when Perseus cuts off Medusa's head, from her head spring twins, one of them being Pegasus and the other I can't remember. And since she's dead, she can't be there for her children. That's why she feels protective over another child that's been abandoned by Poseidon. When Percy cuts off Medusa's head, we don't see her disintegrate. So either she is still invisible, or she dusted away invisible, which I'm really not sure how that works. And if she dusts away and regenerates, as monsters do, as we know, best example Mrs. Dodds, because she's already back, can Medusa regenerate without her head? Because we know her head didn't dust away, and it's kind of a spoil of war. For the Minotaur, he can definitely regenerate with either just one horn or grow a new horn. With the head, it's a bit different, because there are then essentially 2 heads of you in the world. So, I don't know. I know in the books we haven't seen her regenerate anytime. Maybe she's not gonna regenerate at all. And in general, Medusa's message is correct, but her execution is faulty. It's like with most of the villains. It's like the best example is Thanos from the Marvel Universe. The general idea is great, but killing half of the people is not a good execution, if you know what I mean. And I also like the new narrative, not explicitly stating the rape, but kind of implying it, that Medusa experienced in the original Greek stories. Like I said, there is this really cool interview on Variety, so definitely check this out if you're interested in this new narrative. Since Alecto got turned to stone and crumbled, I'm interested if she will ever return. We know she makes a few appearances here and there in future books, but since there are still 2 of her sisters around, I don't know if she'll stay stone forever, or since she crumbled she died. I have no idea. And this whole episode makes you wants you to think that Annabeth will be the one who betrays Percy. If you haven't read the books before, do you think Annabeth will be the one to betray Percy, or who do you think will be the one that calls him friend that will betray him? And I also took a closer look at the credits. We got the name Sarah for one of the demigods. She's the one in the wheelchair because she was also in the credits for episode 2. The sister of Alecto, the other Fury, we know it's Tisiphone, so we have not met Megara yet. I think that's the 3rd one. So maybe we'll meet her when we go to the underworld. And there's also someone named Samara, but I couldn't really figure out who this person is because on the IMDb page there was no picture, and I'm theorizing is a demigod, so maybe they'll be in other episodes and we'll see them again. And overall, it is really hard hard to decide, but I think this has been my favorite episode so far. I've said it about everyone, so if I watch the first one, of course that's my favorite. Then I watched the second one and I was like, oh no, that's my favorite. Now I watched the third one and I'm thinking, oh no, that's my favorite. What did you think about this episode? Let me know on social media. And we will continue with some trivia trials. I'm going to ask you 2 questions related to today's topics. But first, let's check out last week's answers. The first question was kind of a long one. Well, not the question wasn't long, but the answer was long. It was name the cabins of Camp Half-Blood in order. So I'm just gonna name them from 1 to 12. It goes Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Ares, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hephaestus, Aphrodite, Hermes, Dionysus. And the second question was, who plays young Percy? And this very talented actor is named Azriel Delman, or Delman. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, but he does an incredible job. Now let's get on to this week's question. The first one is, in mythology, Medusa has 2 sisters. Together they are known as the Gorgons. What are their names? And the second question is, Bear McCreary, the person who is responsible for this awesome soundtrack that we have in this series, is nominated for 2 Grammys in 2024. For which project are these nominations? And if you want, you can also name the categories he's nominated in. You have until next episode until I reveal the correct answers. If you want, you can DM me your answers on Instagram at Delphi_Dispatches_pod, and then we'll see how you did. I say it almost every time, but now it's time for one of my favorite segments, mythical music. I know I said that I would put a song from the soundtrack in the playlist this week, but I couldn't decide which one because they're all so good. So we will put the song from the end of this episode in this playlist. The song is called Arthur's Theme, and in parentheses, The Best You Can Do, by Christopher Cross, and it is the title theme from the 1981 film Arthur, starring Dudley Moore and Liza Minnelli. The song won an Oscar for Best Original Song and spent 3 weeks on number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. I think this song, being the elevator song to Mount Olympus, is great. The line, "When you get caught between the moon and New York City," fits perfect since this is exactly where Mount Olympus is, between the moon and New York City. And that concludes another adventure with Delphi Dispatches. Thank you, Demigods, for joining me on today's quest. Please consider subscribing to the podcast, and if you want, you can connect with me on Instagram. Just follow at Delphi_Dispatches_pod for updates and a fun community. This is Martina, signing off until next time, and remember, the real world is where the monsters are.